All right, guys, it is Jamie here with milkallergymom.com, and I am super excited that we have with us again the famous Dr. Siri, my favorite allergist immunologist. How are you today, Dr. Siri?
I'm doing fantastic. It's warm
Awesome.
today.
Well, we have a new topic that our crew wants to talk about, and admittedly, I am not an expert on this, Dr. Siri, so you are really going to have to help me on this topic. But I think it's something you have a lot of experience in. And we're going to link everybody over to your website so they can learn more about you, see your bio, see your website, all that stuff too. So we'll put that link in when we post this video up. But let's just go ahead and dive right into our topic today. I think a lot of our community has already met you and love you like I do. We want to talk about EoE. I cannot even hardly say the long word version of it. So I'm going to really need your help today. But this is a topic I feel like when we started our membership 3 years ago, we weren't hearing much about it. Kind of the desensitization was more coming on scene, and we've done a lot of videos about that. And food allergies in general, and asthma, and all those conditions, eczema. But today, can we dive into EoE? I need to have a little bit of an explanation of what it is to start, and then we're going to get into here at the end some member questions that they had some specific general questions about the condition. So can you define it for us? What kind of a condition is this, EoE? And of course, start with the full word, because you're
Yes.
going to need to
So
know that.
EoE is a mouthful. There's no pun intended there. The term stands for eosinophilic esophagitis. And so the eosinophilic part comes from this white cell that's in our bodies called eosinophils. And the esophagitis part is inflammation of the esophagus, which is that tube that connects your mouth to your stomach. It's part of a larger category of diseases, which we shorten to EGID or EGID, which is esophageal gastrointestinal disorders associated with eosinophils. And so it's complicated in that we did not really 20 years ago recognize it as a disease. So it's kind of like, is this a new disease? Was it always there? Is it emerging? I think that people think there are parallels with increased rise in food allergies and food issues, as well as this rise in this eosinophilic esophagitis. But certainly it's possible that this used to exist, in large forms way back in the day. It's just people didn't know what it was and thought it was just bad acid reflux.
Right.
So,
I mean, I definitely dealt with that. I probably have more experience than I think. I had major acid reflux through my high school, college years. I worked up through the antacid medicines, the Pepcid, Nexium. I was going into the doctor having scopes. All I knew was that they said everything looked okay. They stretched my esophagus and did like a biopsy and said everything looked okay, but they did a stretch thing and said, I was good to go. And I still dealt with the symptoms and things. And for me, it was a matter of just eventually I came to you. You did a food allergy testing on me. I cut some foods that I thought maybe was causing so much acid reflux, and kind of just healed up and feel better now. But I wondered, that was 25 years ago.
right.
Don't do the math. Don't do that. But so who knows? And I think I was going to a GI doctor. So this maybe has been around longer than we think, and
Right.
it now has a name.
Yes.
So what are the symptoms of it? Is it like an acid reflux symptom type of thing, or?
Well, that certainly can be one of the symptoms. And I think your question also pertains to, you had asked, can this occur in children and adults? Yeah, you can develop EoE at any point in your life. The most common scenario under the age of 18 is typically a boy who has trouble swallowing and eats really slow. But that's certainly not the case. We see girls with it, we see adult women, we see adult men, and you can develop it at any stage in your life. And some people have had it for many years, and they finally have a name for it. Really what it is that eosinophils migrate or are found into the esophagus. And of course, other parts of the gastrointestinal tract is possible, but eosinophils don't belong there. They typically are not there. And this white cell goes there abnormally and causes havoc and wreaks inflammation and all sorts of things. And if you have it for long term, then you can have problems such as scarring, additional inflammation, strictures. So those all things are related to the symptoms, which are, you feel acid reflux, you feel like the food's coming up, you feel like the food gets stuck, you have trouble swallowing, which we doctors call dysphagia. Some people have it so severe, they've noticed it kind of gradually over time, and they notice that they have to drink a lot of water, chew their food really small, and they have to eat slowly. And at some point, they eat a tenacious food, which is like, thick bread or eggs or a piece of meat. That's like the classic one, is like a piece of steak. And then it gets lodged in there, and they do all sorts of maneuvers to try to get it out. And many people feel like they're choking on the food. They finally get it out, and then it's to the condition where they get it stuck that they finally have to go to the emergency room. Many people experience this several times and have progressively noticed a problem, but some people don't know that they shouldn't be feeling this way because that's what they know growing up. This is how they eat, and they don't realize it's a problem until something gets stuck. And so that's oftentimes the first time somebody presents or is seen with the disorder, is in the emergency room when a GI doctor gets called in and they've got to fish out a piece of food out of somebody's esophagus. And so these eosinophils, of course, wreak inflammation, wreak havoc, and there's always an acid reflux component to EoE, because either the inflammation causes chemicals that causes more reflux, or the reflux begins and bathes the area with acid, abnormally produced acid up the chain, and then you get damage, and then the eosinophils migrate. Whether it's chicken or egg or chicken, the people really don't know exactly what the association is, but we always know there's always some acid reflux. Sometimes it's really vague. Some people just say, well, I have burning in the chest. Some people say I have belly pain or chest pain. But really that constellation of symptoms is what we think of with EoE. It's not that common to have things like nausea or vomiting, but sometimes, yeah. And usually solid foods always first, and then liquid foods when really severe. So most people don't complain about liquids unless, of course, it's something that's triggering their EoE.
Gotcha. Yeah. I was going to ask that about the vomiting being a symptom. I feel like we've heard about that quite a bit. So it sounds like people typically don't figure out they have it until they really have some bad symptoms that cause them to go have things looked at, or sends them to the emergency room to start the ball. I mean, I know when I felt bad all the time, it was just like I could not eat. I just felt terrible all the time every time I would eat. And so you do get to that. I don't know if that's what I had, but you get to the point where you have to kind of figure it out. So I'm kind of thinking, I know some of our moms would be like, well, maybe we have it and we don't know it. With mild symptoms. So how important is it, if I don't even know what I'm really asking, but some would worry maybe they have it, but they don't know it and their symptoms aren't bad enough. What is the situation when you're dealing with something like that?
I think in particular, kind of there's a difference between children and adults. In particular, if a child is complaining repeatedly of issues, then we have a tendency to say, let's refer you to get evaluated. Because we know, up to 20% of children at some point in their life might get a food allergy. And so I think that's why we're concerned that this is going to cause malnutrition, cause problems, and we don't want them to be those adults later on in life who, even though they've healed esophagus, they still feel like they have symptoms because of some scarring. So I think under the age of 18, there's a tendency to, if they have recurrent symptoms not being treated well, to go ahead and refer them. Sometimes truly it's acid reflux, which can be anatomical, but sometimes it is related to just a simple food allergy. Now, this is a little bit distinct than the EoE that develops in OIT. So in those who are undergoing oral food immunotherapy, that is a risk that you're eating a food that you're allergic to, and you can have EoE-like symptoms. So we call that EoE-like disease associated with OIT, or ELORS, ELORS. So it's EoE that's induced by OIT, but then you stop the OIT and then the symptoms go back to normal. And so some people have symptoms that are similar, kind of like you're going through OIT, you might get some abdominal pain, some nausea, things like that. And then your doctor takes you back and steps back so that we kind of fly under the radar and give you a dose that's not going to trigger symptoms. So that could be early signs of, something that could evolve into EoE if we don't back up or treat it. So I think that it's important to make that distinction because, for example, in our practice, we've had some kids who developed some gastrointestinal symptoms. And, if in the context that we're giving you a food you're allergic to, most likely that's what it is. It's probably unnecessary to start eliminating 10,000 other foods when we know we're giving you a peanut or milk and that's triggering your symptoms.
And it started after you began consuming that. That
Yeah.
makes sense. So I do want to talk about OIT a little bit, which is desensitizing food allergies. And so you're taking in your allergens and that might trigger the EoE to begin. But you said, so EoE symptoms are often at least acid reflux type symptoms, but acid reflux is not always EoE. Is that how that goes?
Correct. Yes, there can be all sorts of gastrointestinal reflux disorders where there's no EoE. And so how do we diagnose that? So the only really way to diagnose it clinically, it sounds like you may have EoE, but a GI doctor has to go in with an upper endoscopy in which they put you to sleep, they take a camera, they take a look, and then they do biopsies. And they do biopsies, depending on how the procedure goes and the physician, how well they're trained, they'll do the biopsies in the upper part of the esophagus, the middle part of the esophagus, and the lower part of the esophagus. Not everybody does all those three areas. It is possible to have skip areas. So basically you can have some areas involved and areas, not other areas involved. So it's helpful to be able to sample from different areas of the esophagus.